There's so much to be happy about, isn't there? Or is there? Let's kick off with this growing scandal, I think, surrounding the West Midlands Chief Constable, Police Chief Craig Guildford, who, by the way, I just found out today, he's also the Police Chief's lead on ethics. So he is the ethics guru of all police chiefs around the country. Nevertheless, he's accused of being extremely unethical and lying through his teeth about why he or his force banned Jewish football fans from attending that Aston Villa match in Birmingham. Of course, these were the fans of Tel Aviv, Maccabi Tel Aviv, who have a reputation for trouble. But Guildford's initially let it be known that he'd consulted Dutch police in Amsterdam about a Tel Aviv Maccabi game there, and that the advice he got was, don't let these fans come anywhere near, etc. Now, he was sort of trying to lay this out to Parliament as well yesterday, but the Dutch police have said, well, we didn't tell him anything of the sort. And of course, there's a very strong story that while the Tel Aviv Maccabi fans, it is true, do not have the best reputation in the world, what happened when they went to Amsterdam were there were huge hordes of opposing fans and indeed Muslims waiting in the wings on what they called a Jew hunt. So when the Maccabi fans arrived in Amsterdam, they were pounced upon. So they didn't start the trouble. All in all, Guildford stands accused, particularly by Kemi Badenoch today, of capitulating to Islamists and then collaborating with them to cover this whole thing up. She says, we have had enough of this in Britain. The Chief Constable's position is untenable. So what he is now saying is, well, what we were told, this is Craig Guildford, what we were told is by our Muslim community here in Birmingham, that they were so furious about the potential arrival of these Jewish fans that they would arm themselves and there would be a virtual war in Britain's second city, Birmingham. And as such, he didn't think he could keep the Jewish fans safe. Of course, what Kemi Badenoch and other critics are saying is, well, hang on a second. That is no reason to ban the fans. That is your job to make sure that they can pursue their human right to attend a match of their football club. Before I get your comments, Isabel, I'll play you a few clips from yesterday's extraordinary parliamentary committee. It was called as a kind of emergency measure as this scandal escalates. First of all, in fairness to West Midlands Chief Constable Craig Guildford, here are his thoughts on this murky situation.
It feels to us from everything we've seen that there was a need that you felt that you had to justify banning these fans, and that the scraping was done to find a reason.
Right. Well, that's absolutely not the case. I'm really sorry if it comes across in that way. That was absolutely not the case. The information, the intelligence that we received, that we documented, and we've shared absolutely all of that with HMICFRS very recently. Was all gone through. The mistake that was made in terms of the West Ham was one individual doing one Google search because he couldn't find the other. He couldn't find the rest because it wasn't there within the system.
Okay, that's what he's saying. Here's two of the MPs on that committee who are having none of this. First of all, this is Dr. Peter Prinsley.
Why are we hearing about this now? Why is it that a report come at lunchtime today for Times newspaper that you had information on the 5th of September that were likely to vigilante groups and the West Midlands community itself planning to take action against Maccabi fans? How is it this committee is just hearing this for the first time?
I think this is the first time specifically that you've asked for that detail. That's what we tried. That's what we tried to get across.
So what the MP, somebody said, astonishing, shocking. what the MPs are basically saying, you mean you've kept this a secret until now? Here is Labour MP Joanne Reid putting in her sixpence. Have a look at this.
What I'm getting from this so far is that there's a range of different intelligence information sources. But correct me if I'm wrong, it feels that what you have done in that process is suppressed information that isn't consistent with the decision you've made in intelligence and released and published information which supports the decision to ban the away fans.
Well, there you have it. The MPs are quite clearly not believing a word that this guy says. So this is essentially the story against Craig Guildford. It is that far from him gaining intelligence from Dutch police that these Maccabi fans would cause trouble and therefore he couldn't protect them, that he actually collaborated with the local Islamist community, the Muslim community in Birmingham, who told him, if you let these fans come here, we will take up arms and we will attack them. There will be a war. So rather than him saying what he should have done is, listen, I am an officer of the law, and if you do that, you will be arrested. I will not allow you to do that, and these fans will be allowed to attend their team's game. He just capitulated, collaborated, and said, well, OK, leave it with me. I'll come up with something to make it look as if the Dutch police told me so. The Dutch police saying we told him no such thing, no such thing. Kemi Badenoch leading a hell of a chorus of disapproval, demanding that this guy is sacked. I would say his distinguished career must be on borrowed time.
This is such a serious story, and it just reminded me that instinct is a powerful thing, and political instinct is something that you don't actually have to have worked at Westminster, worked around the Houses of Parliament for a long time to have. Most people have that political instinct, even if they don't know it. Now, what did that instinct tell people at the time this controversy was kicking off a few months ago? That instinct told people there's something not right here. There's something really, really fishy about this ban on the away fans coming to Birmingham. We all felt it. We all felt there was something we weren't being told. And now, sure enough, it emerges that what we weren't being told is even more shocking than we might have imagined. What we weren't being told is that there was a threat from people living in Birmingham and many others who may have come in from outside to cause a fight, that they would take up arms to have a kind of running street battle potentially with those foreign fans. That is absolutely extraordinary in itself. It is then extraordinary that the authorities who knew this apparently sought to cover it up. And what is further extraordinary is the performance of the West Midlands police representatives at that committee yesterday. I mean, guys, do you not realise that you're on a massive public platform here, and it might be a good idea to get your ducks in a row and work out how you're going to frame things so that you don't look both kind of underhand and incompetent at the same time? Because that is what looks to me that was the image they projected from that inquiry yesterday. And frankly, I think the MPs on the committee were rather more polite than perhaps West Midlands police deserved.
Yeah, most of their answers, he was with a few of his flunkies, most of their answers were met by gasps of astonishment by the MPs, who were having none of it. Lord Walney tweeted, so not only did West Midlands police fabricate evidence on the supposed threat from Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, quotes, by mistake, close quotes, they've just admitted they sat on genuine intelligence that local armed gangs were preparing to attack the visiting fans. It's true, isn't it? I mean, this is extraordinary. As I just said, here they turn up at this special parliamentary committee yesterday, and when it emerges, he says, oh, well, what we found out that you know, these Muslims, they were going to attack the fans, they'd taken up arms. And so the MP's going, oh, hang on a second, you never said this before. So suddenly, and then what was his answer? Well, no one asked us.
I mean, that's extraordinary in itself, isn't it? For goodness sake, you know, that in itself, I think, shows such a level of misjudgment and weakness as to make this individual unfit for the office that he holds. And there's a much wider point here, isn't there? If you take it beyond West Midlands Police, and it is about the overreach of aggressive minorities in our society who seem to be able, not only do they think that they can almost literally call the shots, they seem to actually get away with it. Here we have a fringe group, because I've no doubt that most people in Birmingham, whatever their race or religion, would have been totally lawfully welcoming of outside fans. But I'm afraid a fringe group whipped up a campaign, and there was a very organised campaign in Birmingham around this time, and they were allowed to get their way. And that is a real insight into why we are where we are with such division in our country. And it is because aggressive fringe groups of people that don't share our values are able to actually shape policy in a way that is incredibly corrosive.
Well, exactly. And the local MPs, local Muslim campaigners, they got out, including, of course, Jeremy Corbyn, who isn't a local MP, but never saw an anti-Jew campaign that he didn't want to get involved in. They got together this big petition demanding that Jewish people were not allowed into Aston Villa on this night, saying it would cause community tension, etc., etc., etc. And then we subsequently heard Mr. Guildford, the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, saying, you know, after consultations with the Safety Action Group and stakeholders and all the usual jargon and crap they come out with, we have decided, that we cannot guarantee the Jewish fans' safety, and therefore we are banning them from attending or urging them not to attend. Maccabi Tel Aviv fell on in with it. The team, they stopped selling. They didn't sell any tickets to their fans, and therefore they didn't get to go. But what this seems to add up to is the very powerful Muslim community, particularly in the Aston area of Birmingham, where Aston Villa is, where Villa Park is, very heavy Muslim population there, that they basically said to the police, you better not let these Jews come here. And the police said, fair enough, we won't. This is outrageous.
It is unbelievable, and I really struggle to see how the Chief Constable can keep his job. I really do. I think that it's unsustainable. I thought the whole thing was a complete scandal. You know, even the Prime Minister at the time was saying this is ridiculous, not quite the words he used, but I was sure actually at the time that it would be reversed. It seems so completely indefensible that West Midlands Police should be so feeble, should be so apparently unable to do their own job of keeping the community safe. And now we learn that it's so much worse than that. The guy's got to go.
Yeah, it was Ayub Khan is the Birmingham, the MP for Birmingham Perry Bar, which covers the area. Lots of Muslim campaigners got involved as well. Jeremy Corbyn got involved, and they basically said, keep the Jews out of Birmingham. And the police said, fair enough, we'll do that. And subsequent, this is what Craig Guildford stands accused of. Subsequent to that, he stands accused of cooking up the fact, or the dubious fact, that Dutch police told him, well, if you let these Maccabi Tel Aviv fans in, you're guaranteed to have trouble because they always cause trouble. Dutch police said, no, they were ambushed when they came here, and we told West Midlands Police nothing of the sort. We did not give them this information. I would say that Craig Guildford's distinguished career is in a lot of trouble.
Well, and it's not the first controversy around West Midlands Police, is it, on his watch? So I think his days are numbered, although these people have a hell of a habit of clinging on, don't they?
Yeah. But what, why is it always we always capitulate, to the Muslim communities? I'm not going to go at Muslims, but it is always the fact that they carry so much weight. Politicians, Keir Starmer quakes at the very idea of Islam, falls on his knees. What do you need? What can I do for you? Communities all over the country. What do you need? Yes, yes. Oh, you want that? We'll do this for you. Everybody seems to be terrified of our Islamic community. 4 million of them in this country. As far as I'm concerned, they're very welcome, but they better not keep telling us what we can and cannot do in our own country. But that said, you can't blame them for keep telling us what we can and cannot do in our own country, because the authorities always capitulate and say, all right, then we'll do exactly what you want. It's unbelievable.
Well, I think a lot of the problems stem from an inadequate and very weak Muslim community leadership in the UK, because of those 4 million, you've only got a fraction that are the kind of hardline Islamic extremists, if you like, that we don't actually want in our country. When I say we, I mean you and I don't care, but I don't think most of our listeners would want them either. Frankly, many Middle Eastern countries don't want these types of very hardline Islamists. The majority of Muslims in the UK are not like that.
Exactly,
but they don't have a good voice, do they?
Yeah. What we're talking about here, and this is what happened in the West Midlands, as far as I'm concerned, in Birmingham, was a capitulation not to the Muslim community. As you say, most Muslims are decent people like the rest of us, decent law-abiding citizens. But there is a caucus of extremists. And what we see around the country, time and time again, this is what we saw in Birmingham, if you ask me, was a capitulation not to the Muslim community, but to the extremists among that Muslim community.
That's right.
That's the problem, isn't it?
That is exactly right. Now, that is a failure, I would say, of the Muslim community as a whole, because what we don't have is pushback from moderate Muslims. Now, if we had that, and we had louder, more reasonable voices from moderate Islam in the UK, then this debate would be a whole lot less toxic, wouldn't it? And I would love to see more amazing, wonderful, moderate Muslims come forward in the UK as leaders of their religion, of their faith, and actually put a bit more balance into all of this. Because right now, an awful lot is being shaped by the kind of hardliners that I don't think have a place in our communities.
Yeah. And also, by the way, by extension, particularly in this saga in Birmingham, the rights of our Jewish community are trampled over. It's always, do what the Muslims want, never mind the Jews. And that's something else that has to be stopped. It has to be stopped. We're talking about anti-Semitism really here, aren't we? And again, it has to be stamped out. Let's go to break, Isabel. When we come back, we'll talk about drinking and driving. That next. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm still with Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, let's talk about this drink driving initiative from the government. Hard to see why they've decided to do this all of a sudden. This is the first time the drink driving laws have been changed since, this is a proposal, they haven't been changed yet, but there's been no proposals to change them since 1967. The campaigners who want this to happen say that in 2023, for example, 1 in 6 road fatalities involved drink driving. What Labour want to do, I mean, what worries me about this, we all oppose drink driving. It's a terrible thing to do, and if we could stamp it out, well, that would be great. But this is a free society. There must be free choice. We must be able to make our own decisions. And what worries me about this kind of government, these socialists, is they want to take our decision making away from us, and they'll make up our minds for us. So with this, they want to bring the amount of beer, for example, you could drink and still drive down to less than a pint. Less than a pint. In other words, don't even bother. And there are no real statistics to say that this will dramatically reduce road accidents or fatalities. So you wonder really exactly why Labour want to do this all of a sudden? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it feels a bit of a dead cat, doesn't it? You know, one of those sort of big distractions from the kind of massive, real, everyday things that people care about. I mean, the truth is that certainly young people are generally drinking so much less than they used to, partly because non-alcoholic beers and spirits, or kind of replica spirits, not zero alcohol, have become so good. You know, they are actually completely different from the kind of, you know, the dreary low alcohol wine, which was about all you used to be able to get in terms of low alcohol or non-alcoholic stuff. You know, it's actually a whole different market now, and it is easier, I think, socially to go to the pub and not actually to drink alcohol. That said, you know, is this really necessary? I don't know. I personally wouldn't want to go to the pub and drink the maximum that you're allowed within the drink driving limit, for example, on an empty stomach, and then rock into my car. You know, but all of this is very individual judgment, isn't it? You know, most people sort of know, you'd like to think, or at least know what their limit is when their judgment is going to be impaired. I don't know really if more legislation is needed on this. I think there's a very big issue around other things. You know, drug driving is probably a bigger issue these days.
Yeah, which campaigners say the authorities do very little about. It's still all about drinking and driving. As I say, of course, we all condemn drinking and driving. It's a terrible thing to do, and it causes terrible accidents. I heard Julia Hartley-Brewer talking this morning, and I've had the same experiences myself. If you're, many of us worked on local papers. You used to be in the magistrates' court, and there'd be, you know, these families, these mothers weeping because their son had been killed, you know, by a drunk driver. And, you know, you see a few of those cases and you think, yes, we need strict laws to make sure that people do not drink and drive. But at the same time, you know, I just worry about these socialists. I worry about Keir's crew. I worry about this Labour government, because this is about people making responsible decisions, and the vast majority of motorists make very responsible decisions. Even I don't drink and drive, so that's to, you know, prove just how far this goes. So Labour say, oh well, we don't trust you, and we're going to give you just more laws, more laws, tell you what to do, stick our nose into your business. Bigger government, big government, and fewer and fewer powers to the individual. That's what worries me about this. I wonder, it's a good, interesting point you made there, a dead cat to try and divert from some of the other governmental problems at the moment. I mean, but it's quite bemusing as to why they've suddenly come up with this.
It is quite bemusing because there are so many other targets for interfering if you're going to be interfering at this kind of level. I mean, there is a real issue with the demise of community pubs, and, you know, that is hollowing out villages. I see it, in fact, even in the affluent part of the Cotswolds where I am. You know, it's not unusual to drive through a village and the pub is abandoned, and often there's a kind of community attempt to actually buy it, to club together, and the amounts of money that have to be raised are pretty daunting. You know, they will be, because property is expensive in the south, you know, communities are having to raise hundreds of thousands of pounds and then, you know, run stuff as a volunteer. And I do think that in the countryside, if you were to say you can't even have, you know, one glass of wine or even a couple of sips of alcohol, that probably would be yet another blow for an industry that is really struggling already, particularly with, again, the measures that Rachel Reeves has brought in on employment rights and minimum wages and extra benefits here and there, that's just making it so difficult for employers to hire people.
Yeah, exactly right. And as you say, the pub industry, the hospitality industry, pub landlords are absolutely furious about this. They've got enough problems as it is, pubs closing at an alarming rate. This will make matters even worse. I mean, Labour seems to have some sort of grudge against the hospitality industry, and that it does sort of fit in with their killjoy approach to life. You know, or let's ban smoking in pub gardens, they won't like that, you know, and so on and so forth. Just leave us alone. Why can't they just leave us alone?
Yeah, I don't know, Kev. I mean, the devil makes work for idle hands, doesn't he? Yeah. But I mean, their hands shouldn't be idle because there's so much more important stuff to be cracking on with.
Just makes you wonder what goes on in Westminster, doesn't it? You know, what on one desk is someone going, yeah, I'm just going to bring down the limit for, you know, 1 teaspoon of beer, and on the next desk there's someone saying, yeah, you got to send some helicopters in to help Donald Trump in the North Atlantic. We're taking over another Venezuelan tanker. You know, priorities. You know what I mean? Unbelievable.
I'll tell you what goes on at Westminster: an awful lot of drinking, but not much driving.
Yeah, luckily they've all got chauffeur-driven cars. That's the solution. When I become Prime Minister, when I become President of this land, chauffeur-driven cars for everyone. That's a vote winner, isn't it?
Quite liking that one, yeah.
There you go. There you go. Vote for Kev. Let's go to break, Isabel. When we come back, we'll talk about Lee Anderson, Reform UK's redoubtable MP, who's got some interesting views on the BBC. We'll talk about that after these messages. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm still with Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, before the break, I said we'd talk about Lee Anderson, but let's do that after the next break because this story fits in with our last story a little bit better. It's Nanny State Labour again. Nanny State, you can't drink anything before you drive, all that sort of thing. No more than that much wine, that much beer. Get out of our lives. Anyway, now Labour want to ban calling mobility scooters invalid carriages because they say that that's offensive. It's an offensive term. Now, while you might think, well, all a load of tittle-tattle, who cares? Because, of course, nobody does care except stupid, puritanical MPs with nothing better to do. It will require quite a lot of taxpayers' money, this, because laws will have to be rewritten. Lots of documents will have to be rewritten because mobility scooters are perennially referred to in legal documents, in law, as invalid carriages. So Labour want to waste a load of our money changing that to just mobility scooters because invalid carriages is so offensive. Why can't these MPs, why can't these politicians get a bloody life? No one cares, am I right?
Literally no one's heard of them being called invalid carriages anyway.
Exactly, that's true.
That's the first I've heard of it. It does sound like in my mind, I'm kind of envisaging like a horse and carriage, which is carrying an ill person.
Right.
That is what it sounds like. And it's just not a problem that's there. I mean, no one spends time poring over this ancient, written record. I just don't think there's any need to change anything that's already there that can't be changed by, can't you just kind of do a Control F, find all the references to invalid carriages and change that to whatever else you want to call it? Why does that cost money? I mean, I don't see why that isn't something that could be done pretty speedily with modern computing systems. And if it can't be done speedily, then how about we just resolve that going forward, we will just use different terminology. Yeah. It's completely unnecessary, ludicrous row. The term, I think we can all agree, is farcical, it's archaic, but it's not offensive.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it back. I mean, I don't think I've ever used the term in my life. But from now on, everybody I see on a mobility scooter, I was going to look at that guy on an invalid carriage. But it gets worse. I mean, we're laughing about this, but I think this goes to the heart of what is wrong with these interfering socialist puritanical idiots. This is going to cost us, you, me, every taxpayer in Britain, a fortune. As part of this potential move to cease the use of the term invalid carriage that nobody uses anyway, the Department of Transport will be conducting a 12-week-long review.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, I am not kidding you. In which people, particularly disabled people, will be asked if they believe the term should be changed and what their preferred alternative term would be. Now, let me just add to this. This is the Minister for Social Security and Disability, Sir Stephen Timms. He said, "We are determined to break down barriers to opportunity for disabled people and improving access to assistive technology, as well as making sure that laws around its use are up to date. And this is essential. I encourage disabled people to respond to the Department of Transport's consultation so their views be..." Now, I would say that probably nearly every disabled person in this country will have a look at, I see the Department of Transport want me to take part in a 12-week-long review. I think nearly all disabled people will say, do you know what? Funnily enough, I've got better things to do with my life. What is wrong with these people? It's unbelievable, isn't it?
I mean, you say that they won't take part in the survey, but I can assure you that there are very, very aggressive and vocal campaign groups for disabled people who will get fully stuck into this. They will create long reams of documents about why things need to be different. And I'm not dissing those groups in general. They're very much needed. You know, there's huge aspects of our society that are very poorly set up for differently abled people, if I can try to be as politically correct as I can be. But all too often, energy is devoted in the wrong way. And I just don't think this is worthy of anybody's time and attention. And I don't understand why it needs a consultation. Why are we even talking about it?
Because it's Labour. That's what they do. As I just said to you, in terms of, you know, whether or not you can have a teaspoonful of beer or a pint of beer before you get behind the wheel. You know, OK, I'm not against, you know, keeping a weather eye on drink driving. It's something that we should take seriously. But is it top of the priority list right now? Is whether or not we call mobility scooters invalid carriages on any kind of priority list? And yet for Stephen Timms and the Department of Transport, this is seriously important. You know, these people, they just dwell on a different planet to the rest of us, don't they?
I really do think they do dwell on a different planet. Just a small thing to share with you, that here in the UAE, they call disabled people of determination. And I quite like that. I think that's a nice little phrase. But doubtless if it were used in Britain, the people of determination would be determined to be offended by that characterisation.
Yeah, and what about people who are actually people of determination, who aren't disabled? Would they be deprived of being called people of determination because of this euphemism? I mean, you know, I agree with you. I do quite like the sound of people of determination, but in the end, it's just another ridiculous euphemism, isn't it?
It's just words. That's all it is. And actually, what the government should be concentrating on is changing realities for disabled people. You know, I'm the last person to be good at listing what the top priorities for that are, but there are so many in terms of access, in terms of getting on and off aeroplanes. That is a nightmare for disabled people. The quality, the kind of state of disabled toilets. I mean, honestly, people will go on with many, many better priorities than changing this terminology in ancient legislation.
Just for information, the laws concerning mobility scooters and powered wheelchairs were originally introduced in 1970. So what this is all about is that the legislation, you know, the documented law, uses the term invalid carriage. And this government wants to spend a fortune changing that to mobility scooter or whatever the hell new word they want to use, new term they want to use. Well, as I say, I really think, there are more important things to do. I really think none of us are going to lose too much sleep if we continue calling them invalid carriages in this 50-year-old law, 55-year-old law. And as you said, when was the last time you heard anyone use the term invalid carriage? I mean, come on. Unbelievable. When we come back, as I said before, we'll get on to Lee Anderson, who's had one of his classic, rather amusing outbursts in Parliament, this time about the BBC, everyone's favourite target. That next. Stick around. Welcome back. I'm still with Talk's international editor Isabel Oakeshott. Let's talk about MPs, Isabel. Of course, by a country mile, my favourite MP in all of Westminster is Richard Tice. I don't know if you know him, but my second favourite for comedy value, but also because I think he is a really good politician, is Lee Anderson. One of those rare Westminster types who tells it like it is. Actually, he speaks, human being, doesn't he? He speaks like a man on the street, which so few of them do. And yesterday he was laying in to the BBC, explaining why he doesn't pay his BBC TV licence fee anymore. Take it away, Lee.
A whole raft of perverts that have stalked the corridors of the BBC. And none of these here will talk about this. Not one of them. And mark my words, Miss Harris, there are still these creatures stalking the corridors of the BBC, and in the future their names will come out and come back to this.
So there's Lee in classic form. I'm not sure whether we've lost it. There's Lee. He's basically saying that he doesn't pay his BBC TV licence fee. He hasn't paid it for 10 years because, as he put it, he doesn't want to put his money into the pension pot of perverts. Interestingly, he says that after Hugh Edwards, Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris, the list goes on, you know what we're talking about, there are more. He says there are definitely more like that still stalking the corridors of Power Up Broadcasting House. You might like to know, interestingly, as we talk, only recently, a couple of hours ago, Channel 5, or 5 as they now call themselves, have announced they're making a TV drama all about Hugh Edwards. That's entertainment. That should be fun, shouldn't it? I mean, what do you think of, what do you make of what Lee is saying there? And I just think it's very interesting that he says, mark my words, there are more. And, I'm quite well connected in the showbiz television arena, and I hear the same. I hear there may be at least two more big names at the BBC who we might be hearing a lot more about in the not so distant future. Interesting.
Yeah, what a depressing thought that is. So I haven't spoken to Lee Anderson about this at all, but, for any politician to say it in that way, mark my words, it does make it sound as if he knows something that we don't know. But I think more broadly, what that probably points to is that change is coming for the BBC and its licence system. And actually, Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, has pretty much said as much herself, although I doubt this Labour government will go that far on it. But Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, has been about as blunt in different words as Lee Anderson when it comes to his disdain of the BBC licence fee payer system. And he's been very, very stark about it, hasn't he? He has said if there is a Reform government in future, and it's an if Nigel Farage were to become Prime Minister, the BBC would be looking at a very, very different world. I think they would be having to scale right back in terms of what they would be getting from the public purse, and they would have to justify their existence on a much more commercial basis, like all other media outlets like our own have to do. So change is coming for the BBC, and I'm almost not sure it needs any more scandals to convince, certainly not to convince Reform's leadership that something needs to be done. You kind of wonder what the point of any more scandals is. We've had so many, haven't we? And were there to be more, what more will it tell us? We know that this this whole edifice, this whole establishment is rotten.
Exactly right. And the Christmas TV ratings, BBC crowing about, oh, we had 9 of the top 10 most watched shows. Well, yeah, that's always the case. The fact of the matter was they were 16-20% down on last year. And in fact, none of the BBC programmes made the top slot. That was the King's Speech. That's never happened before. And, you know, programmes like EastEnders, which back in the 1980s once got 33 million people watched it on Christmas Day when Angie presented Dirty Den with divorce papers. I still haven't quite got over the shock of that. 33 million people watched that. 2.8 million watched the EastEnders Christmas Day special this year. So a dramatic decline from last year. Last year, their big programme, Gavin and Stacey, got 12 million live and 19 million after people had watched it on the BBC iPlayer as well. So big figures, 19 million. This year their top programme was 4.2 million. Dramatic decrease. Now they'll talk about, with some justification, you know, the changing television landscape, the move away from terrestrial, YouTube, independent viewing, so, you know, streaming and so on. They've got some justification with that. But what they won't talk about, which I think is at the heart of this, is that the British public have fallen out of love with Auntie Beeb. They don't love her anymore. They don't like her even. You've got Labour who cling on to, oh, give BBC everything it wants is public sector broadcasting. It's not commercial. We love that. So, you know, that's their view of it. But loads of Tories, right-wing MPs go, oh, don't criticise the BBC because the British public love the BBC. No, they don't. Not anymore. Everything is changing, I think.
Yeah, I haven't seen any polling on this recently, but I'm sure that everything is changing for a combination of reasons. One, yes, the whole media landscape is changing. You know, you and I know this only too well in the privileged seats in which we sit, and we've all got to adapt. You know, it's the same for print media. People are consuming their information in a very different way. But secondly, because the BBC is tainted. I mean, it just is tainted. You know, when you have a huge figure like Hugh Edwards exposed for being something totally other than what we all thought, that is immensely damaging. And coming on the back of other cases of what Lee Anderson would characterise as perverts, is tremendously damaging. And I think, you know, fast forward 10 years from now, how is this going to look? I still think the BBC is a valuable global export. It still has, frankly, more credibility probably outside the UK than it actually does have within the UK. You know, around the world, people are nowhere near as critical of the BBC as we in the UK are. Yeah. Simply because they don't follow all these, you know, slightly smutty, low-rent scandals. You know, they just know the BBC for producing, you know, what they see as credible reporting from war zones and places like
Do they? Because we don't. I mean, that's half the problem. Their coverage of Gaza has completely shot their reputation for fair, balanced, fine journalism to pieces. It's been shot to pieces. The people of Britain don't trust the BBC anymore. They don't trust its journalism, which is shocking. Now, as you were implying, I'm not against the BBC. Far from it. You know, I think, you know, particularly people who work there. I've got a lot of friends who work there. The BBC, fine. What I am against is its business model. Us being forced by law to pay it the best part of £180 a year, and if we don't, we get fined or even possibly sent to prison. That's got to stop. And it would be good for the BBC, because the BBC, because it gets once a year £3.8 billion in TV licence fee money, £3.8 billion once a year, it's made it lazy and lackadaisical. It doesn't bother to make programmes necessarily that people are that interested in, because it doesn't have the commercial imperative. It needs the commercial imperative, and that will improve the qualities of its programmes. We need to change this TV licence fee system, and fast. It's anachronistic, out of time.
Absolutely, and I think it's actually extraordinary that the Conservatives, who had all those years to do it and were under a lot of pressure from a lot of Conservative supporters to actually make those changes, basically did nothing at all. It is going to happen, I'm sure of it, and that will be for the better. Perhaps the output will be better quality. And, you know, in terms of bias in international reporting, I don't think we know the half of it because, you know, for example, on the Israel-Gaza situation, so much of the bias is in Arabic, and you and I aren't sitting there being expert in that, are we? And the other beef I have with it, and it's an important one, is actually there's far too much emphasis on random stories from countries, you know, that really have very little to do with Britain. It's supposed to be the British broadcasting corporation. You know, I don't want to see at the top of the homepage some story about, you know, witch doctors in Nigeria or something.
They do a lot of that. I mean, Women's Hour, only very rarely does it ever refer to Britain. I mean, it's like a sort of around the world view of women everywhere. Women's Hour, of course, being the epicenter of BBC inaccuracy insofar as it has never been an hour. It's like 45 minutes. It's never been an hour. It's 45 minutes. But yeah, the BBC has got to change. But interesting what Lee Anderson was saying, and I'm sure he didn't say that lightly. I think you're absolutely right. And I've heard the same. There are at least two big names there who may have an uncomfortable year this year. And if they do, if we get more sort of Hugh Edwards, Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris type scandals, even Greg Wallace from MasterChef, the BBC will be in a world of trouble, Isabel, fantastic to talk to you as always. Thank you so much for a great hour. That's Talk's international editor Isabel Oakeshott.